Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Indira, and today I'm here with New Balance athlete Jenny Nesbitt. Jenny's been a great athlete from the start, achieving international success from a young age. She's also encountered quite a few hurdles in her time, and over the years has developed a really good mindset and approach for running. In this episode, we talk through some of the common challenges that runners face and how she's dealt with these along her journey and still is dealing with them, and why it's important to value mental health and growth when you're an athlete and person in general. As always, before we get into the episode, please be sure to give it a rating if you've been enjoying the show. It really helps to give credibility to the podcast so I can keep bringing you guys the guests you want to hear from. Okay, let's get into the episode. Hi, Jenny, how are you? And welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really good, thanks. It's a gloomy day, but I'm good.
Yeah, the weather's not the most pleasant at this time of year, that is for sure, but I'm glad things are going well in general. Any reason in particular?
Cool. Had a nice run with a group of people from the club this morning, so that was good, despite the weather. It always kind of sets you up for a Sunday, doesn't it? Because then you can come home and do nothing for the rest of the day, which is quite nice. So, yeah, I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, definitely. It's a Sunday long run's a bit of a get out of jail free clause, to be fair. You know, you've done it, right, left the house, I've done something, I should rest and recover now. I mean, that's all there is really.
Absolutely. There's nothing else to do on a Sunday, considering everything shuts as well at like 4 o'clock. Like, that's it. Like,
Oh yeah, that that is the thing. You've got to make sure you get it in time to be able to go shopping if you need to go shopping or yeah.
well, we've recently discovered the online Tesco shop, and we have a subscription now for free delivery. So I've ticked the shopping box. I just do it from the sofa.
Problem, solution. I love that. I did not know there was the online subscription option.
I recommend it to anybody.
Oh my gosh, that's good to hear. Okay, and normally I guess with like Sunday long runs, you normally run with a group or what's kind of vibe?
A little bit of both, really. It depends kind of what mood I'm in, to be honest. Sometimes I just want to be really antisocial. I don't want to speak to anybody. Then other times I'll join the group. So we have a club. Well, I'm a member of a club called Ponty Free Rodents, and we always meet 9 o'clock at the pub for the long run. And sometimes there's about two people, but I think today there's probably about 10 of us, 10 or 11. So it's really good. Everyone kind of turns up. It's a social run, really, and whoever goes the shortest, we do that, turn around, go back out, do a few loops around and stuff. So it's a good social, and I enjoyed it today. I fancied the company.
Yeah, well, by the sounds of it, everyone did. Maybe the weather had something to do with that a little bit. And I guess on that note, long runs are always a funny thing. You know, are you someone who overall tends to be more of a run solo or run with music, run in silence, run with people? What's your preferred?
I've cycled a lot between loads of different things, to be honest. I used to be someone who couldn't leave the house without music on. Whereas now I do enjoy like the kind of runs to myself where I just listen to myself breathing, and I've got the footsteps and stuff. I run a lot with my partner during the week, to be honest. We kind of, especially in the evenings now it's dark. Like if it gets past like 4:30, I don't really want to go out on my own. I kind of wait for him. But I do a lot of my like actual like quality work sessions and stuff by myself. And to be honest, I quite enjoy it. I think it very much like allows me to run the required effort on the day, and I don't have to worry about what someone else is doing. Except for those kind of really, really hard key sessions when I'm trying to like find somebody to help me out.
Yeah, no, that's definitely so true. Sometimes there's a time and a place for other people if you've got something very specific you want to hit, but it can be nice to have that freedom to really tune into yourself and do what you want to do. And on that note, then are you sort of coached by anyone or what's your setup?
So, yeah, so I actually until recently I was coached by Chris Jones for eight years. Kind of picked me up in 2000. Well, he was actually my cross country captain for Eurocross in 2015, and then he kept in contact with me. And he became my coach officially in like the back end of 2017, I think. But recently, had a little bit of a switch up, and my fiance coaches me, which is a new dynamic, I have got to say. But I think, yeah, I mean, we still call Chris the Oracle, and we go to him a lot for kind of help around kind of the structure of my program and things that potentially could be missing. But yeah, my partner Dave, he kind of writes it, sets it, and we go back and forth on it a lot, um, trying to get kind of what we want out of it. But yeah, it's only been 5 months now, 4 months, so it's very early days, but I'm enjoying it so far.
That's good. So it sounds like it's a positive start. So hopefully that'll continue moving forwards. And that's really interesting. I think there are quite a few people who are sometimes coached by someone who they're in a relationship with, and it can seem to be a very, very positive thing, I guess, when you've got someone who knows you that well. But how long have you been together versus he's been coaching you? And yeah, you say it's kind of a different dynamic. Is there any expansion around that?
Yeah, so I mean, we got together in 2022, so some people might say that's relatively fresh, but we kind of just hit it off straight away and we got engaged at the beginning of this year.
Oh,
Uh,
congrats.
Thank you. So yeah, and he's always been really into running, like loves it, and is like a massive like student of the sport. And he used to get on really well, or still gets on really well with Chris, and they would come to my sessions and talk about running and coaching and training methods and stuff, and their kind of uh training like style is very similar. But I think I was coming across a lot of like problems trying to string consistency together with either slightly overtraining at some points or like having various different health problems or a niggle crop up here. So like yeah, I think having Dave kind of there every day, kind of seeing what I'm doing and what my lifestyle is looking like at the time and whether I'm stressed or not, it kind of just helps um direct the training so it's a little bit more specific, I guess. As an example, last weekend I had a session on Saturday and he was stood there at the side watching me and I was complaining about a niggling tendon in my foot and he just like called me to stop it, pull me out of it, told me not to take the next day off, and then come this week I've been absolutely fine. And I think in the past perhaps I'd have tried to like push it, or I'd have rung up Chris and been like, yeah, it's fine, like I think I'll be all right, and like gone another day and probably like then made a dent into the next week. So I think things like that have been really positive.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I guess sometimes it's, I suppose, accountability to some extent, or having someone who's kind of there in the moment. And, maybe if you have got a lot of willpower or determination, it can be easy to, I guess, override or maybe play down how something's feeling. But if someone's there, it's like, oh, I can't really hide this.
Absolutely. And it's not like I can just call up a coach and be like, yeah, I'm fine, and then go home and complain about it. It's like I complain about it, then I complain about it, and then he sees me doing something. He's like, why are you icing your foot? I'm like, oh no, I've been caught now. So I may as well just like suck it up for a day and yeah, listen to him. Sometimes we do butt heads a little bit, but apart from that.
I mean, I guess that's part of any healthy relationship's got to come with a little bit of headbutting. So. Oh, okay. Well, no, it'll be really interesting, I think, as well, to sort of talk around consistency and how you've found your way to that. Because I think that is something that so many people struggle with. And I mean, it is such a fine line between trying to get the most out of yourself, but also protect yourself so you can keep getting the most out of yourself. So yeah, we should dive into that. But first things first, for anyone who doesn't already know who you are, can you briefly introduce yourself as an athlete?
Yeah, okay. So I guess like I live and breathe running. I've pretty much done it all my life. I started at school when I was about 13, I think, which for some people is like relatively late getting into it. I'm not sure. I didn't enjoy running beforehand. I remember my uncle lives in San Diego and he was training for like the Paris Marathon at the time and he'd offered to like go for a little run with me and I was like hands down like absolutely not. I hate running. And a couple of years later, here I am enjoying it at school. Um, so yeah, got into it at school. We did the ESSA School Cup as well as like our individual English schools. And we won that 2 years in a row, I think. So that was quite fun, and it kind of I guess gave me that first experience of what competing at a national level was like. And I loved it. And I guess yeah, from then just kept going, and here I am today, still doing it. Um, yeah, a long time later, I guess. So I guess that's me running in a nutshell. I loved it when I was 13 and I still love it just as much as I do now.
Well, love it, loving it, and smashing it as well. So quite a nice combo. But that's quite interesting what you say about coming in from school because yeah, on Power of 10 anyway, you come in as an under 15, which is a little bit later, and you don't really seem to do anything other than these school cups for the first 2 years. So Was that purely just kind of school keeping you in it? And then what kind of led you to actually start competing aside from school?
Actually, so when I started competing at school for athletics, I was also diagnosed with anorexia.
Ah,
So the kind of coincided at the same time. And yeah, aside from like the school events, really, I was not well enough to compete in any other kind of competitions away from that. I always claim that running saved my life in terms of helping me kind of get out of the dark depths of an eating disorder. Um, and it gave me that kind of motivation and drive to kind of be successful at something that reflected the you needed a healthy to be in a healthy enough place to be able to be successful. I wanted to be successful at it, so it gave me kind of that kind of yeah something to hold on to, I guess, throughout my early kind of beginning in the sport. And school was really good in kind of giving me that platform to do so, so long as I was healthy enough to be able to do it. And I think it got to like the summer of like whatever years I was at school, and I worked my ass off every year for about 3 years, and it was this continuous cycle of getting to the summer, being healthy enough to do it, and then going downhill a little bit. But eventually, kind of that cycle ended, and I was able to kind of maintain a positively healthier place. Kind of yeah, later on in my teens.
oh, that's really positive to hear. And, it's really great how something like running can give you that platform or that motivation to work through things in, the more personal side of life. And I guess it's also in some ways a bit of a kind of other way round to how some people often experience an eating disorder at the same time as running, it being brought on by the running. But in your case, it seems that the running sort of took it away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to say like that was the one thing that kind of was the only factor. I mean, I spent a lot of times going through CAMs and various different kind of private hospitals, but it was definitely that one thing that I held on to and gave enough respect to that kind of helped me kind of repurpose my thoughts and my thinking, and yeah, give me that kind of ambition, I guess, to I saw what other people were doing and I wanted to get there too. And it was drilled into me from a very young age that if I was going to be doing that, I'd have to attain other certain standards first. So yeah, I think it yeah, helped me get to a good place.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And I guess in terms of, initially having anorexia, if you feel comfortable, is that something you could elaborate on, maybe kind of the origins of that?
Yeah, so I went to an all girls school when I was like 10 and 11, maybe a little bit before that as well. And they merged with our grammar school next door. And I think that change in environment was a catalyst. My parents also divorced around the same time. And because of my dad's job, we moved house a lot. So, kind of growing up, I was very unsettled. I went to a lot of different schools. And I think I just had like a lot of kind of insecurities about myself, really, that kind of probably all combined or a catalyst for kind of developing an eating disorder. Um, I never really figured out the one main drive for it, but I think kind of yeah, all those things combined kind of was the starting point for it, really.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And, people kind of within the field talk about it being often something that comes in a time when things are unstable or there's a need for sort of a feeling of control. And you can get that by, controlling what you eat. So I suppose running gave you that outlet to sort of put that energy somewhere else and find a bit of stability, consistency. So I guess there's probably a lot of people maybe who are in a similar situation or at some point in their life have used or do use running as an outlet and a way to sort of deal with things that are going on. What would you have said to yourself at that time when you sort of started moving into your journey with running and inadvertently also tackling the anorexia that you wish you sort of maybe knew before you started?
Um, I think I learned a lot along the way, to be honest. And I think I was very lucky that the people who were kind of looking after me and my parents gave me the responsibility to put myself in a position to be able to kind of be involved in running. And I think they saw it as a really important part of my recovery. Um, I think we can all be really hard on ourselves sometimes. And I think using the sport firstly for kind of positive health and well-being before trying to be competitive is really important. And I think sometimes I got caught up in two kind of blurred lines a little bit, and it was doing it for kind of, yeah, the outcome of a performance rather than like just protecting my health. So I think maybe perhaps that would be the first thing I'd want to highlight is like you need to be doing this because you want to do it, and that's got to be the driving factor before you're looking at why or what reasons you're doing it for, like a performance outcome, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely some really wise words there. And I think something that every athlete comes across at some stage in their running journey, at the point where they realize, hang on a minute, am I still enjoying this? Has the pressure got too much? And yeah, for you, it was a pretty quick progression to the top, really. I mean, you're clearly a very talented athlete, but how was it for you, I suppose, almost within your first year, your first few years competing, being right at the top of the sport almost from the get-go?
To be honest, I loved it. Like I'm an ultra competitive person, and like being up and amongst kind of the top girls in the country was really like exciting for me. And I think at the time I didn't really understand the context of it. I was just there turning up to races and doing as well as I could. I didn't understand any sort of principles behind training. I'd turn up to the club 3 times a week and I'd just do what I was told. I even went to like a sprint group on a Saturday morning. But I absolutely loved it. And I think those kind of positive race outcomes probably gave me a bit of motivation to kind of continue in the sport. And it's definitely shaped my entire life ever since. Like all the decisions I've made have been around trying to be as successful as I can be in the sport. Um, but yeah, I think, yeah, I'm not going to lie, I really enjoyed being up at the top as a junior. And I think, people say it's not perhaps the most important place to be as a kid. Like you got to look at the long-term progression, but it still was really fun and exciting. And yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, it's great to have sort of that level of honesty. It's for sure refreshing because yeah, who wouldn't enjoy doing well as a junior. And it is a great feeling to do well, especially when you're not putting very much into it and you just turn up and you see your times just drop and you beat people and it's a great feeling for sure. And did that ever change at any point? Did you sort of start to feel the pressure? Did you start to find that you're having to put a bit more in? And if so, how did you sort of cope with that?
I'd say only in the last kind of 4 or 5 years have I felt the pressure a little bit more. I think up until then, like it was just turn up, get the job done, see what the result was. I think in the last few years, the consistency's lacked a little bit more in my training, which has been reflected in racing. And I feel sometimes I haven't been able to get out of it what I feel I'm capable of. And then I think the more you do in the sport, the more people come to know who you are and what you've achieved. And perhaps then if you're not attaining the same standard, that can be challenging. And I found that really hard over the last few years, turning up to races and getting, results that perhaps aren't reflective of what my ability is. Um, so I think, yeah, that's been hard in the last few years, and I've had to really take a step back recently and kind of look at the bigger picture and reassess where I am, what my goals are, and the kind of time it's going to take to get to where I want to be as well. So having a bit of realism, it's been really tough, but I think, yeah, I've understood a little bit more now where I'm at and what I need to do, rather than looking at what other people are doing and comparing myself to that.
So many great points there. And definitely it does have to start with sort of that introspection and yourself first. And yeah, sometimes it does take taking a step back or maybe even a few steps back to then take a much bigger one forwards. And yeah, I can imagine that the pressure does become, a lot more in these circumstances. And there's definitely nothing worse than when you produce a performance that's kind of good, but it's not really what you're capable of.
Absolutely. I feel like I've had a lot of those in the last few years. I'd call it like just bang average. And I don't want to be average, to be honest. If I'm going to dedicate all my time to this, like I want to excel. And I think that's a good thing, but also be a hindrance at the same time because I am really, really hard on myself. And Dave's always telling me like, look at this, look what you did 3 weeks ago and look what you've done now. And I'm like, yeah, but look what I did 2 years ago and look what I've done now. And I'm not in the same place. And we're constantly having this kind of battle with each other, and he's always trying to big me up and I'm always trying to pull myself down. So I think it's trying to find that happy medium as well, where I can appreciate where I'm at and kind of use it as positive energy kind of to progress.
Yeah, definitely. It's really difficult to rationalize sometimes, especially because something like running, I mean, you've got race results, you've got positions, you've got race distances, you've got times. You know when it's not the same as it was, and it's blatantly obvious. And that can be difficult to deal with. And you say how, you're very hard on yourself, which so many athletes are. Is that something that you'd say applies to all areas of your life, or is it specifically running that you think you really bring that hammer down?
I'd probably say to all areas of my life, to be honest. I'm very like, I, I always kind of look at things more negatively than I do positively. And um, whether that be, I'm super dyslexic. So like, whether that be like, I can't read a sentence properly, or my spelling is wrong, or my grammar's terrible. Like, I'm always looking at like the negative things rather than being like, oh, well, I've actually managed to read a book this month. Like, that's a positive. Um, so yeah, I think it is reflected in all areas of my life, and I'm very aware of it, but actually trying to like rewire your mindset's really hard to do. Like, working on that is really challenging. I'm trying to, but it's taking a long time.
I mean, all great things take time. And I think the first step of any journey is always the awareness. Once you know that something's there, then it's slowly over time you can make those changes. But yeah, it's definitely a long process, especially when you're kind of hardwired to think in a certain way, or you are someone who's just naturally very hard on yourself. And, often that does go hand in hand with people who are also very successful. So I guess two sides of the same coin. And on that note as well, you say how you've sort of made a lot of your decisions based around running. Was there a specific moment or kind of time where you realized, right, I want to go all in with running? And what are the sort of decisions or the key decisions you've made in terms of prioritizing running?
It goes a long way back, I think. When I was 17, I had an autoimmune disease and I was hospitalized for nearly 6 months. And I wasn't able to run then or for like the following year and a half, really. And I think I had the option then to, I could have just cracked on with life, not looked at running, and no one would have batted an eyelid, like absolutely fine. But um, again, it was the one thing that I kept coming back to because I wanted to do it. And I remember Worcester, where I lived at the time, they had a 10K, and it was like it was the Worcester City 10K. It was their first event, their first kind of iteration of the event. And Paula Radcliffe was racing in it. It was like her last 10K before she ran her last marathon, I think. And I think I was 19 at the time. I begged my coach to like let me do this race. I'd never run a 10K in my life, but I was like, it starts like 100 meters from the house, and I want to do it. I was like, Paula Radcliffe's running, that'd be cool. So I convinced him, and I did the race, and I actually beat her on the day, and I think I ran like 34 and a half minutes or something. But I
Yeah,
think at the time,
34:21.
there it is, yeah. At the time, I think I was quite good for like a under 20. So I was like, oh,
Definitely.
I was like so happy with the result. And I feel like I came through so much adversity to get there. And I think the people in my really close circle could see that. And I just loved it so much. And I think that was kind of the beginning kind of thoughts for me to be like, you know what, like I've done this off the kind of hard last 2 years. What can I do if I really dedicate all my time to it? And I think I'm the sort of person that wants to go all in on something. I'm all in on it. So yeah, my decisions based on my whole life since then have been based around running, pretty much.
Wow. Gosh, no, that must have been really, really challenging to deal with. I mean, being hospitalized sounds like quite a serious situation.
Yeah, it was like I had it was an autoimmune disease called Henoch-Schönlein purpura, which is like a German disease apparently. But it's usually seen in like children under the age of 5. So it took a long time for them to actually diagnose me with it. And it basically attacks all the red blood cells in your body. So like my kidneys started failing, and there was various other things that kind of went with that. So I think, yeah, like managing to kind of climb my way back up to a 34:21 in a 10K within like kind of 2 years of that was a really big moment. And I think, yeah, gave me that kind of like inclination that I could be good at this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's incredible. And how did you find kind of the journey building back after that? Was it quite challenging, or did you feel very motivated and I assume maybe felt a bit better physically as well?
Definitely felt better physically, but I think it kind of gave me a whole new perspective on life. As cliched as that might sound, like um, I was just really grateful to be able to be out doing what I really enjoyed doing and kind of going after something I wanted to because I wanted to do it and I wasn't being held back by anything else. So yeah, I think it just kind of gave me that kind of boost to enjoy it, enjoy the process and the journey and all the other things you're meant to say about kind of making your way back to somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. But it is so true. It is definitely how it feels. And you kind of need those events sometimes in life to shock you back to reality and remind you why you're doing something and what's really important. And it's almost like without something like that happening, maybe you can't necessarily fully embrace that kind of mindset. Would you say that maybe if you hadn't had adversity at that time and maybe at other times as well, you might not necessarily be the kind of runner you are today?
I definitely think so. I think if nothing else, it taught me that I can be really tough. And I'm not the sort of person to give up. And I think there's definitely moments since then that I've had adversity where I really wanted to give up and I've not felt tough, but I've managed to kind of pull on some of the kind of things I learned, I guess, my mental strength from those times to kind of get me through other moments as well. So I think, yeah, it's given me kind of those skill sets that perhaps you wouldn't learn, where you definitely probably wouldn't learn in school, as an example.
Yeah, definitely. And so I suppose it looks like you went to Bath Uni. Was that a decision based mainly on the running setup there, or kind of how did that come about? And obviously, you then competed quite a lot at international competitions, performed very, very well over the next few years, I suppose, while you're at uni. So, yeah, talk us through kind of your mindset during that time.
So originally I had to take a year out of school because I was ill so I didn't sit my A levels until a year later than I was supposed to. So I did that, tick the box, got the A levels, happy days. I then decided that I was going to take a gap year. So I took a gap year. I did a personal training qualification just in Worcester where I was living and spent that year training and just running as like just putting in the training basically and seeing where I got to. I can't quite remember the results, but I think I got my first England vest potentially that year. And I think I was top 15 at Liverpool or something. Um,
Yeah, there's certainly,
I,
I mean, there was the European cross country champs in 2015, where you were 13th.
yes, so that was my first year at university. So I'd just been at university for a term. Um, and yeah, I remember making that team so well. And Chris Jones, my old coach, he rang me up and he told me originally that I was reserve, and I was absolutely gutted. And then about an hour later, he rang me back and he was like, I couldn't wait any longer. Like one of the girls is injured who we selected, so we're calling you up for the team. And I was jumping around my university room. I was absolutely over the moon. I honestly thought like my life had been complete at that point. Um, and that was like a fantastic experience. I shared a room at that championship with Laura Muir.
Oh, wow.
So we were on this, yeah. So I think, yeah, I was thrown into the deep end really early. Like, look who I'm sharing a room with. And it was just such a great that was such a great experience and so positive. Um, that it kind of showed me what I was capable of. And I remember on the bus home from Eurocross, they asked if I wanted to run at the Edinburgh Cross in January. And that was like, again, that was like so exciting. Like this race I'd watched on TV, I was now going to go and compete at as a senior. Um, and I think, yeah, that kind of, I call it a purple patch, was just, yeah, so exciting. And it kind of, yeah, gave me the motivation to kind of continue. And I think the everything seemed to go my way for a while. I made the Euro Cup team and I got a bronze medal individually in Turkey. We also got the team gold, I think, that year. I actually came back from that and had knee surgery, which was a shame. Yeah, I ended up actually having knee surgery on both my knees. The cartilage on the back of both of my patellas kind of wore away, and I had to have them both microfractured within a year of each other.
Gosh. Oh my goodness. Wow.
It was
Yeah, I
not.
mean, just to sort of bring anyone up to speed, yeah, I mean, that was 13th at your debut European Cross Country Championships, and then you won the race in Edinburgh, and yeah, a whole host of international competitions, and yeah, including the third at the European 10,000 Cup as well in Turkey, like you mentioned. But gosh, yeah, talk us through that whole knee situation and coming back from that, and mentally how it was to have that hit you when things were going so well.
I do remember it really well. So I came home from Turkey and I remember like the Worcester News was like well into it. So they were like, let's have some photos. And I remember going out for this run and my knee started to hurt and I was like, oh no. But being stubborn like I am, I kind of just pushed myself through it and kept training, kept telling myself there was nothing wrong with it until it got to the point where I physically couldn't go out for the runs without getting back and being in tears because it was so painful. Luckily, we had private health insurance, so I got an MRI scan on it, and it showed like the back of my patella was basically just in bits. So went and got that kind of fixed up. Spent about 4 months cross training like an absolute maniac. Like I definitely like wouldn't recommend it now, but I'd be at the gym at 6:30 in the morning and I'd be hammering out like reps on the cross trainer and going back and doing the same thing in the evening, like every single day. So I definitely, yeah, probably overtrained at that point, but also like I was young and naive and I didn't know any better. Um, and I returned in the winter and did a park run or something. And then the year after I ran the standard for Commonwealth Games, I think.
Yes, 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 yes. I mean, that is a conversation in itself because you compete in the 10,000, the 5,000, and the 3,000 at those Commonwealth Games in Australia. But before we move on to that, I guess just in terms of the cross training in particular, what was your main motivation during that time and how long did it take you to get back in shape?
I think my main motivation at the time was, well, exercise to me is a coping mechanism for everything, whether that's a good or a bad. It still is now. And I think I couldn't run, so I looked elsewhere to get the same kind of hit from exercise, I guess, and wanted to try and keep myself as fit as I possibly can or could. And that's kind of what I turned to. And I'm very much an all or nothing girly. So it was let's go as hard as I can for as long as I can and see what happens. And I returned to running. And I think I remained in relatively good shape. I can't remember the return to run being that challenging. Um, so I think it must have worked, but mentally it was pretty tough.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these things are never easy, but cross training definitely can maintain things really quite well. And with enough sort of time and dedication and commitment, yeah, for sure these things are possible. And yeah, so talk us through that kind of Commonwealth Games experience, because I suppose that was your first. I mean, you'd already competed at a international level, but I think something like the Commonwealth Games is a maybe another level in its own type of thing situation.
Yeah, definitely. I think the year before I went to Taipei and did the World Student Games, and that was the first kind of multi-sport experience. And that obviously like completely different culture. Like that was as far away from like what is like at home as you could get, or I thought at the time anyway. Um, so yeah, I'd had that experience, and I think that set me up really well for the Commonwealth Games. And the whole getting selected for Commonwealth Games in 2018 was a bit of a bizarre one because originally I didn't make the team because they had like a certain number of people they could take, and I was just on the kind of I was the next one on, so I was like the reserve, I guess. And on the day I got selected for the or got called up to be told that I'd made the team for Commonwealth Games, I also got selected for the World Half Marathon Championships. Uh, so I remember this kind of like conversation I had. Like I'd said yes to competing for Great Britain at the World Half Marathon Champs, and then about an hour later, I got called up by James Williams, I think at the time, to tell me I'd been selected for Commonwealth Games, and they both happened over the same time period, so I couldn't do both. So I remember like having to ring them back up and tell them that I couldn't do the World Half Marathon Champs, and I was going to Australia in like 3 days. So I literally had like the phone call on the Saturday and I was on the plane on the Monday to Australia for the Commonwealth Games, which was nuts. And I think I was only 21 at the time. So it was all like just exciting. Yeah, it was amazing. The experience was fantastic. Um, and probably still one of the highlights to this day. I think I came like dead last, or I think I came second last, maybe. Um, I think the only person behind me was Beth Potter, and she did the triathlon the day before. So, like, I'm claiming that I probably came last of that race, but it was like walking into the stadium and competing in the 10,000 meters was insane. It was just so cool.
Gosh, that's amazing. I can't even imagine. And I mean, considering you raced like 3 events, I really
I
don't think that's a problem.
only did one event at the Commonwealth Games. I definitely only did the 10,000 meters.
Oh, I see. They're the splits, right? Okay, that's why you've got it. Because on your right, it's showing as a 3,000, a 5,000. Okay, so those are the splits and they count, right? I did not know that.
Love to claim that I did 3 events at the Commonwealth Games, but don't think I'd made it around all the laps.
To be fair, maybe yeah, the times are a bit slow for a Commonwealth Games, but they were still good enough. I was like, yeah, probably fine. And so you say that that was, even maybe today, to date, one of your best experiences. Was there anything in particular that stood out to you as being maybe the pinnacle of the experience and maybe the biggest thing that you took away from it?
I think the fact that I made it, like I was on the team and I was like in Australia, and the whole kind of the way we were looked after as a team, like as Wales, like we had a holding camp in a place called Mooloolaba, like an hour away from where the games was being held, and we were there for like 4 or 5 weeks beforehand, like training and acclimatizing, and then I competed on the first night of the Commonwealth Games, so I had like the whole week to kind of enjoy the experience and soak it all up. And I think before I went out there, everyone told me like, you're there to do a job, but you've also got to be there and enjoy it. And like, you may never get to do this again. So really enjoy it. And I really embrace that as well. And I think, um, yeah, the lasting memories I've got from that whole kind of championship aren't just from the race, but from the whole environment I was in. I saw what other people who were really excelling in the sport were doing. And yeah, again, I came away from that really motivated to go after the next Commonwealth Games, which, 4 years later, I managed to do as well. So yeah, I was really proud of myself.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you really should have been. And that is definitely a bit of a winning situation. Having it on the first night for sure. And Australia as well, such a nice location. And I suppose as well, you being only 21 at the time, do you think that having that exposure and an opportunity at that point maybe gave you kind of the little boost in motivation that you perhaps needed to keep, maybe say hungry and with your eye kind of on the game and the future and competing at that level moving forwards?
I think so. I think I'm a very driven person as it is. And I think regardless of whether or not I made that team, I'd have wanted to keep going. I had people around me at the time telling me that I could do be successful in the sport. But I think it was more observing what other people were doing that kind of led me to believe like if they're doing that and I'm not doing that yet, like maybe if I start doing that, or if I focus on my nutrition a little bit more, or I do this or I do that, then I could kind of make the next step. So I think I came away with kind of those sort of thoughts rather than I need to do more in my training or anything like that.
That's really positive to hear. And I guess on that note as well, and you sort of speak about it, or you spoke about it a bit earlier on in terms of that fine line between overtraining and kind of getting that consistency and stuff. Maybe seeing the way that other people at perhaps a higher level and maybe where you wanted to be, I guess, trained or certain things they did, sometimes that can become, I suppose, a bit toxic for some people, or maybe toxic's not quite the right word, but kind of cause you to start doing maybe a bit too much or go in a bit too deep. How did you or did you kind of manage to stay kind of measured and yeah, how did it impact you?
It's definitely got harder over the years, I think, because I've come to perhaps read up more on training methods, what I should be doing, like what principles work. I think at that time I was very kind of dumb to it all, really. I just get up, do the run, go home, get up next day, do the same thing. And then perhaps I didn't give the training the respect it deserved either. I was known to hammer all my runs, like every single run I'd go out and run quicker than 6 minute miling. Like as as someone who at the time was running 33 minutes for the 10K, that's just really stupid. But, at the time, like that was what I did and I'd seen success. So I carried on doing it, I guess. I think as I've got older, I've understood the training a bit more. And I think that's actually been more challenging because now I'm perhaps reflecting on what I'm doing a lot more critically than I used to. And I'm looking at things and I'm like, oh God, my lactate there was a bit high, or I shouldn't have done that. Oh, my heart rate here is a bit high. Like, oh God, what's going on? Um, Whereas then I just didn't care. And I think that was actually a blessing in disguise at the time.
For sure. I mean, ignorance is bliss, and it is true. Sometimes you can read too much into it, or sometimes not knowing is the way to go. And I suppose subconsciously, if you don't overthink things, then whether you realize it or not, you are probably leaning into your intuitive kind of feelings and just going with what works for you at the time. And so I suppose if you sort of walk us through maybe the next few years, and you mentioned how it's kind of been the past few years that have been a bit rocky. So do you want to sort of bridge the gap to those years, and then we can sort of talk through them?
Yeah, definitely. 2019,
Yeah.
I won into County Cross, and that was a massive day for me. I was buzzing about that. I think that's probably the most unexpected win I've ever had.
Nice.
Uh, I came from, and and it taught me something really important as well, because I remember about 2 weeks beforehand, I did a session and my coach pulled me out of it because I was absolutely exhausted. And he told me to take a day off, and I was absolutely fuming about it. Um, and I was like, this is it. I'm never going to run well at the cross country now. Like this is all game over. And I went there and I won. And I think when I reflected on that, it really showed me the power of rest and that importance. I'm still gonna say I'm not the best at, listening to my own advice, but I have evidence that it can work. Um, and yeah, I think winning on that day was amazing, and it gave me a place in the team for the World Cross Country Championships, um, which again was a fantastic experience. And I think I finished like 34th, but our team finished fourth that
Yeah,
year.
you were, yeah, bang on with that. And yeah, 10K cross as well. So pretty brutal, I can imagine.
It was brutal. And I mean, the course was really like, it was completely different. We ran up a side of a museum roof and
Oh, yeah, that one.
through like man-made mud and a sand pit. Like it was nuts. Um, but as a team, Great Britain, the girls team, we came fourth, which I think was the highest placing a GB team had had at World Cross for over 20 odd years. And it was a battle, I think, if I can remember rightly, to send a full team to the competition as well. Like I think there was a few queries or I didn't know. I don't think BA were that enthused about sending a full team. So to kind of end up with that result, I think was a bit of a like, yeah, you should take us. Like, look what we've managed to achieve sort of moment as well.
Oh
Um,
no, that's so great to hear. And yeah, also, on with it, sort of the inter-counties win as well. Sometimes I think it can be the ones that you don't expect, or the ones where you're not, hoping for something back so desperately, that allow you to really enjoy the moment.
Absolutely. And I think if I look back at all my best runs, they've all come from where I've turned up and not put pressure on myself to achieve a certain thing, which is so much easier said than done.
Yeah.
But I think, all the races that I've kind of run, I've had like my best performance or I've run a PB. They've all been where I've just turned up and I've just been like, I'm here. I want to be here for a start. And I'm just going to, go with whatever happens and hope for the best.
Yeah, definitely. So it's for sure easier said than done, but if you know it, then at least that's one thing in the right direction there. And yeah, so I suppose obviously 2020 was COVID year, and following on from that, you kind of continue to compete really well at a really high level. I guess a bit more focus on the track, it seems, though, post 2020.
Definitely. Like my only kind of goal from like when COVID kind of started was to qualify for the Commonwealth Games, to qualify for the Commonwealth Games. And it was really hard to run the standard. Like I just couldn't get into races, or there weren't that many races around that kind of gave me the opportunity to run the standard. And I went to every BMC in the country one summer to try and run the standard. And I think I was within 10 seconds every single time I did it. And
That,
it was infuriating summer of my life.
oh gosh. Yeah. As- It is a lot of pressure, isn't it? And it's, so much has to go into getting a race right or getting the right conditions. I mean, it could be windy. Someone could do something stupid in the race that ruins it for everyone or whatever. Gosh, yeah. How did you find that then? Because I suppose that sounds like sort of the first major, I guess, issue in terms of performance wise, things not going quite as well as they had been previously.
Yeah, I think I was panicking because I thought I was running out of time to run the standard because it was like a year out from the games. I hadn't run the standard. Everyone was telling me I could run the standard, and I was like, "Yeah, you can tell me all this, like all you like, but until it's on a piece of paper and I've run the standard, I do not believe you." Um, so I kind of like, yeah, parked the track season. I went to altitude for 4 weeks. I came back and had the best cross country season of my life. Um, I came second at Liverpool and I came 10th Europeans. And a week later, I ran 8:44 indoors, which again, I turned up to that race with absolutely no expectation. I just wanted to break 9 minutes. I wanted my finish time to start with an 8. And I just remember in that race feeling it's always the races you run well, isn't it? It's just feeling so easy. Um, and yeah, I came out with that time and I was like convinced that I would be able to run 15:30 indoors. I was like, that's gonna be fine, like not a problem at all. And so I went to Sheffield at the beginning of January in 2022 to run 15:30, and I ran 15:30.3, I
Yep.
think.
Yep.
I just did not know what to do myself. I was just so angry.
Oh God, I can imagine. I mean, a 5,000 as well is no kind of joke of a distance. That's a considerable amount of effort and time, and to be hitting the wall time and time again in these 5,000s and following such an incredible 3,000. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, it was. I was just like, this can't be happening. Surely not. Um, so I decided to. I got a place actually at a World Indoor Tour in New York, 3K in February, and it just so happened that about 5 days later there was a 5K in Boston, and I'd heard that track was magic. Apparently it's long, but it's magic. Um, and I was like, right, last chance saloon, let's go to this one and see if I can get the job done. And I managed I managed to finally do it.
by
Um,
quite a lot as well.
yeah, that's what someone said to me. If you have a breakthrough, it'll be a big breakthrough,
Mm.
and it was.
Yeah,
Um,
a 15:19.
yeah, yeah. So I was over the moon. And yeah, that kind of set me up for the summer. I got the standard, and I was pretty confident I was going to be in Birmingham.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you did quite a few more 5,000s out there in the States. Was there any sort of particular reason for that?
So I went back actually a couple of weeks later to Flagstaff for an altitude camp, and then I think we decided to go to Peyton Jordan or Stanford, one of the early like March meets to run a 5K just to break up the training a little bit. Um, and I remember doing that race, and it was all right. It was middle of a training week, so it wasn't anything that exciting, but still, like I was really pleased with the outcome. Went back, trained a bit more, and then I ran a 1500-meter PB on the same track. I still think I came near the back of that race, but it was a bit of a baptism of fire. I'm not gonna lie. It was it was so painful, but I did that, and then I think a week later I ran at the Sound Classic or whatever it is, in the 5K there, and it's just a different like gravy out in America. Like the standard is nuts. If you turn up to one of these races, like there's like 20 odd people on the line, and they're all running within like 10 seconds or so of each other, and it's just a bit of a yeah, it's a bit of a it's just like it's nuts, but it's so good. Um, so yeah, I ran another PB there, and then I tried again, which I probably should have done. I kept extending my flight home, and I'd just probably come home. But I tried one more time, trying a bit quicker, but I didn't. So yeah, I came home and I actually think I probably burnt myself out a little bit. I did learn a lot of lessons that year, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, firstly on the America thing, I mean, I think this is where the sport does fall down to some extent. The way it goes by country, X amount go, well, what about the fact some countries are considerably better or have a depth of pool? It's like, maybe not everyone who should be at these major championships is quite making it in. But yeah, it's, I guess, a completely different game out there. And I suppose you say that you learned a lot kind of that year. And I mean, you can see you were 47th at Liverpool, which is a bit further down from your normal kind of top sort of positions. And the Commonwealth Games, obviously an incredible performance, but it was a 15:30, so not quite the times that you had maybe in you. What was the tea around that?
The tea. I think unknowingly to me, I was really stressed out. And what we've learned since is stress has a significant impact on me as a person. I'm very like susceptible to it, and I tend to like press it as far down the pecking order of something as I can. And I don't really tackle any of it head on. And I get stressed out about everything. So like it can be really irrelevant stuff that kind of seems to really leave a dent in me. But I don't think in 2022 I really realized that. And I kind of just, there was a lot going on in life where I was like potentially going to move home. I was like undecided where I wanted to live. I was living on my own, like all these other things, that were going on. And I think only when we take a step back now do we kind of realize the impact that had on me at the time. And I think that took a long time to overcome, actually. It probably took until the end of last year to kind of reset myself. So yeah, I think that was the main tea on that.
No, I mean, yeah, it is so true. I mean, stress is so underrated as an impact. And yeah, I can relate to you there personally. I would say that I'm more of a highly strung person and it definitely does impact me quite a lot too. So I completely get you from that point of view. And how did you go about, I suppose, then patching things back together and making that journey back?
With a lot of struggle, I guess. Um, After my pretty dire performance in Liverpool, I kind of tried to kind of scrape together an indoor season after that. But it was nowhere near kind of what I kind of wanted, I guess. But being the stubborn girl I am, I kept plugging away, and trying to kind of scrape something together. But I think it got to about May or March or April, and it was just like I've just got to give myself a bit of a rest. Um, when I say rest, I do bracket that with I couldn't manage to take more than about 3 days off running before I absolutely lost the plot. So it included a lot of like short, easy runs. But like there was no intensity, there was no structure, there were no races on the plan. I basically detrained a lot, kind of in sort of like April, May, June time, before kind of building my training back up again. Um, I put some subpar performances together for the rest of the year, really. I don't think there was anything that kind of stood out to me, until the last race of the season, the last race of the year around an indoor 3K. I mean, the time isn't impressive, but I finally felt like myself, which I think was the key thing there. And that then was reflected kind of at the beginning of this year where things started to click a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the things that's actually, beautiful about the sport in its own way. And it is that there are times when things don't come together for whatever reason that may be, but it is kind of sticking out through those times that do enable you to then have kind of those breakthroughs. And they do seem to always come. It's just a question of kind of sitting tight. And I think it's always commendable when someone, especially in your position, continues to put themselves on that start line because there's a whole host of reasons why people might decide to step away, and for some people that might absolutely be the right decision. But I think it says a lot about your character in that you were continuing to show up, to finish these races and keep going even when things weren't necessarily working. And I suppose as well, on the kind of note with rest, you saying that 3 days is kind of the max that you can manage. But then if the emotional stress of not running then starts to outweigh the physical benefits of the rest, it's like, well, actually, maybe rest and recovery does need to look different for different people, depending on, other factors such as that.
Absolutely. And I think we are, as athletes and people, all very, very different. We're all very, very individual. And um, like I do see the value, obviously, in rest and recovery, and it's a massively important element to being successful in the sport. But there are, I think, different ways about going about it. And like for me, moving my body is as much to be a successful athlete as it is to be just a well balanced, like mentally stable girl as well. um and I think, yeah, finding that balance is actually really hard sometimes. But yeah, it's kind of learning what works and kind of acting on things a little bit quicker than perhaps I have done in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything in particular that you might pinpoint now that's something that that, oh, past me would have done this, but I'm gonna do this now with my new mindset? Anything like that come around recently?
I'm slightly more happy to perhaps deviate from the plan than I would have done in the past. I will actively slow my runs down a little bit if I feel I need to, or I will perhaps change a session around if I need to as well. Whereas in the past, I definitely wouldn't have done that, and I think that's probably where I fall down sometimes, is my ability to kind of deviate from a plan. I find that really challenging. Once something's there and I see it and it's in my head that this is what I'm doing, if it changes, I really struggle with that change, um, in all areas of life, not just with running. Um, so yeah, I think that's probably the biggest positive I can see in the last kind of few months slash years that I've been able to do is slightly deviate from a plan in order to kind of satisfy where I am in training and what I need, for the kind of the best outcome.
That's really great to hear. And I do love the use of slightly deviate, but you know what? Baby steps are everything. That's where real progress is made. Um, and yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people do talk about, kind of struggling to, I suppose, be adaptable in certain situations. And would you say that maybe the adversity to a change in plan comes from a place of feeling like you've failed if you haven't completed it, or what's kind of the underlying feeling there?
Absolutely. I have a massive fear of, I'm not going to say failure, but I have a massive fear of wasting my time. Like from when I was younger and being unwell, like I feel like I missed a lot of my kind of junior years and that kind of air, like that experience of growing up, to kind of illness. And I feel like now I have a massive fear of wasting time. And if I'm not doing what I see as something that's in the moment going to make me or progress me, um, rather than like rest, which obviously is still going to have a progressive outcome. But to me, I'm not physically going out and doing something. I struggle with that. Um, so I think, yeah, that kind of on and off the back of that, then I feel like I failed. Um, so I think, yeah, it's kind of understanding that and learning that actually there are many ways to be successful. And just because you do something that's slightly different to what it says doesn't mean you're an instant failure. Um, and I keep having to remind myself of that. And I think Dave's very good at reminding me of that as well. Like, like putting things into perspective a little bit and, yeah, helping me see things in a slightly different way.
Yeah, no, I mean that all makes so much sense, and I think it kind of just goes to show as well how impactful kind of life experience can be on sort of your overall mindset, on how you approach situations. And yeah, I don't know if you're into tattoos, but maybe that's one to get on the back of your hand or something. But no, it's really positive to hear, and clearly, I guess some of these changes have had a positive impact, because I mean, you opened this year with a 15:10 on the 5,000, which is really, really, really quite something. So do you want to sort of walk us through maybe the highlights of this year and how it's been I suppose, refinding your form again?
Definitely. I'd say there's been definite highlights this year, but there's definitely been low lights as well. Um, I think, yeah, the beginning of this year, I think I just kind of threw caution to the wind a little bit and like kind of let go of perhaps wanting to achieve something because the year beforehand had just been so dire. Um, but yeah, the goal kind of was to run a 5K in Boston. I wanted to go back to that track basically, and I wanted to go there in a good shape. And that was kind of from kind of the end of December through to February. That was the goal, and that's what we worked towards. And I think going into that race, I think my coach knew what sort of shape I was in, and I thought I was fit, but I didn't really know what sort of shape I was in, and I still kicked myself thinking I probably could have run faster, as we all do. But I was very, I ran very scared. I think I kind of sat at the back of the race, and I think I came last in that race, and I think I remember ringing him up, being, I've never been so happy to be last in a race in my life. Like to run 15:10 on that day, I was, yeah, really pleased with it, and I thought it would be kind of a catalyst for the rest of the year. But there was a few kind of health problems that went on, and again, like I was impacted with stress, and I just think I got a niggle before Highgate, so that ruled me out of Highgate, and then there were races in the summer where kind of just things that were out of my control impacted them, and I never felt like I got the best out of any of my performances. Um, so yeah, I think that was definitely the highlight, the 15:10, and then the rest was very kind of not terrible, but again, like bang average. And I think that, reflecting on this year, the one thing I really want to be able to achieve next year is consistently good performances. Um, like if I never ran faster than 15:10, but I ran 5 of them in a row, like in consecutive races, I feel like that's the way I can then progress forward. So I think, yeah, you're not going to see me running any 5Ks on the track next year, I don't think, but I think the same applies to whatever event you're doing.
That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think, sorry to hear that there's been so many kind of hiccups this year, but I guess if you flip it and look at it from another lens, the performances that you have had, bar the 15:10, whilst you might, I suppose, class them as bang average, and they're certainly not necessarily what you are capable of, and you've shown that in the past. I suppose, given the factors going on, then actually maybe those performances are actually quite good considering, because I suppose you've got to remove some of it due to other things going wrong, and those are kind of more outside of your control. So there's no reason why the consistency that you're looking for can't come. It just got to wait for life, I suppose, to give you a nice clean stretch.
Absolutely. And like I struggle to like I really can't stand it when people say, "Oh, well, my training suggests I'm in this shape," but then when they go and race, they don't perform to that level. So
Mm.
I very much struggle to be like, "Oh, but I think I'm in this shape, but oh, I've only run this," and reflect on it in any other way than it's not as good as I want it to be.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's the one thing that ticks me off is like when people are like, "Oh, but I think I can do this." Well, until you've done it, you can't.
That is so true. That is so true.
So I think, yeah, for me, yeah, string some consistency together that's kind of greater than 5 weeks, and perhaps just put together B plus training. I think I'll hopefully match or exceed what I want to do in the next kind of 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, the running world's your oyster, but yeah, it seems that so many people kind of hit bumps at some stage, and it seems that as well, like a lot of people who manage to get consistent good performances tend to be the type of person who's quite chilled to some extent, and they kind of manage to always bash out the 80% without ever going for a 90 or an 100. And that seems to be the kind of sweet spot in terms of long-term produce the performances from kind of people I've spoken to.
Absolutely. I think I'd like to call them the people that don't overthink things.
Mm.
And if I, if I can take a leaf out of their books, I think I'm onto a winner.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, on the flip side, I feel like people who manage to sort of sail through for quite a long time without having a hiccup. At some stage, everyone's going to be hit by something. So, best get them out the way early so you've got the mentality to deal with things, or just get them out the way so there's no more to come. But um, yeah. I mean the half in Valencia as well, that's kind of new because you haven't typically done as many, I suppose, like halves or longer distances. So where did that come from? And is that something that you might be looking to lean into a bit more in the future?
Yeah, it kind of came from just wanting to challenge myself in a different way. Um, a lot of the half marathons I've done previously have been paydays, to be honest, and I've never trained for one. Um, and I had this great idea that I was gonna, put a full training block together for this half marathon, but as things happened, I had to take a couple of weeks off at the end of August, beginning of September. So my, long build up ended up being about 6 weeks. But yeah, I just wanted to challenge myself in a new way. And I feel like I'm getting old now, and I want to move to the roads and give myself an opportunity to try and be successful on there in the next kind of 4 years, I guess. And I feel like now is probably a good time to do that. If I don't do it now, I'm probably not going to give myself long enough to learn what it's like to race on the road, because in my experience so far, it's like completely different to track racing. um, so yeah, I wanted to change up the training a little bit and kind of, yeah, increase the distance I'm racing. So I guess I'm not saying goodbye to the track completely. I think, there'll be a time and a place to return to it. But I think my focus is a little bit more on the road now.
That makes a lot of sense. And sometimes it's nice to just change things up in general, but it seems that there's an increasing number of opportunities for road races. I think it was quite recently, wasn't it? There was the first World Road something championships. So
Yeah,
yeah, it seems to be a lot of sort of potential there. And yeah, of course, I think more money sometimes comes along with these types of things.
definitely. And I think as well, like I see road racing, and I might change my opinion on this, but at the moment I view it as like the be all and end all of road racing isn't making a Great Britain team. You can go to a world major and you can finish in the top 10, 12, 15, and that's probably just as good as a result as going to a European road running champs, or a European championships. And so I think there's probably a wider range of opportunity to kind of match something that kind of sometimes is taken out of your control, like this team selection.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and of course, there's always the time element of it as well, which brings its own satisfaction and kind of its own little side internal competition, I suppose, to some extent. And yeah, I guess on that note as well, you're with New Balance.
Yes. Yeah. I signed with them in 2022 as well. So it was a big year in 2022.
And how's that kind of changed your approach to racing or running at all, having that as well?
I think like obviously like it's been so like valuable being supported by them, like kit, money, like the races I've done in Boston, like the indoor tour, like it's all been supported by them, and that's given me so many experiences that I perhaps wouldn't necessarily have had otherwise. Um, there's also an element of like it gives you a bit of confidence when a brand wants to support you, I guess. Like I'm not saying that you can't be successful if you're not supported by a brand, and there's so many people that are, but I think um if they feel like you're worthy of an investment, that's quite like it's a bit of a pump up, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it's nice to
you
have
know
that kind of, I guess, external boost to give you that confidence that you need.
Definitely, but I also on the flip side think it comes with a lot more pressure, and I've definitely found that in the last few years where I perhaps haven't performed to a level where I would think they'd want me to be at. And I found that hard as well. Turning up to a race wearing the elite kit and not performing like an elite is it's not embarrassing, but it's a bit disheartening as well. So I think it does come with kind of its pluses and its minuses, I guess.
I mean, personally, I don't think I could ever do that. And I'm quite glad I'm not in that position actually, because it is a lot of stress and pressure to keep yourself, I think, physically in a certain shape. And I don't, it's not really possible to keep your body at 100% all the time because that's just not how it works. But yeah, I guess the thing is, to people looking in from the outside, the times are still really good. And I suppose it's the quality of athlete. People know that you're on that level. And I guess to the outside eye, it just comes across as, oh, they must be going through a rough patch, or oh, clearly it wasn't their day. But I guess everyone around, it's easier to be like, oh, but we all know they're a great athlete.
Yeah, I think so. It's just like you have expectations of yourself that you sometimes perhaps that's hard. Um, but then it goes back to perhaps you have to be a little bit less hard on yourself and you can't view everything as a failure. So it's like it's working on all the little steps to kind of view the bigger picture in a better light, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of things going on at once, and a lot of different. I guess it's kind of like being pressured and stretched from a load of different directions, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think it always comes back to like, are you enjoying this? Because that is the most important thing. And I think there's no point in pursuing something that is really hard. Like day in, day out, it's hard physically, but I think mentally it's actually really tough as well. And I think it's got to come back to, are you enjoying this? Do you want to be doing it? And if you can say yes, like wholeheartedly to both of those, I think then you're able to kind of manage the struggles a little bit better and um, embrace the success too.
Yeah, no, definitely that all makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and so you talk about the pressure being a lot, and that's definitely such a consideration for athletes, and something that maybe not everyone does give as much attention to, that kind of mental impact. Have you had any sort of reflections around kind of the mental side of the sport, and how to, I suppose, deal with that level of pressure?
I've definitely like learned more about this over the last few years, I guess, and I'm still trying to learn to give it the same respect as like physical health. Um, I think, you know, I think typically athletes are really hard on themselves. They always want to do more, and it's hard to perhaps always reflect on things positively. And I definitely struggle to do that. And I'm usually, yeah, more negative on myself than I am positive. And it takes a lot for other people. I think I'm very lucky that I have a really positive support system around me who always try to like help me see things in a good light and help me reflect on things that perhaps I tend to not kind of think about in terms of what my performances are kind of showing. Um, but I also think there's an element of perhaps everybody trying to protect their mental health a bit and um, accepting that you are going to have a wobble here and there, and there are going to be struggles, and that it's okay for that as well. And there shouldn't be a stigma around it, and it's just as important as your physical health, really. If you turned up to a race with a crutch and a cast in your leg and you've got a stress fracture, that should be, respected just as much as turning up to a race and saying you don't want to run because you're really struggling with your mental health, I
Mm.
think.
No, definitely. You make a great point. Yeah, the physical's obvious and it's there to see, but the mental is, I think, something that has a increasingly recognized huge impact on people, and it very much is an equal counterpart to physical health. But because it can't be seen, it's very easy for it to get, I think, pushed down. And what would you say is the best thing that you've done for your mental health?
I think perhaps building when I started out as an athlete, like you eventually build this team of people around you. Like you've got your coach, you've got your physio, you've got your physiologist, you've got your S&C coach. You might have a sports psychologist, but I think one thing that's really neglected is like just your general mental well-being. And I think I think the problem is probably accessibility and cost, but like actually speaking to somebody monthly, maybe, just to talk about your general health, your general mental health, is kind of, I think, a key to the puzzle that is probably neglected by a lot of people. And I think for me, I've seen a lot of value in doing that, and it has taken me a lot of years to build the courage up to getting to a point where I am open to going to speak to somebody. Like that's been really hard for me, and it's only since doing so that I've kind of realized that it's probably been a really important part of my team, in quotations, that I've neglected. So I think reflecting on that has kind of showed to me that it is just as important, if not more important, than the S&C coach or the nutritionist in your team.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say was the maybe the initial thing that put you off perhaps speaking to someone? And is there anything in particular that maybe gave you the courage initially to take that first step?
I think perhaps my situation is really unique, but as a kid growing up with anorexia, I went through CAMS and I had a lot of psychology kind of growing up, and I was in and out of therapy at some points 3 times a week. So I've always associated going to speak to somebody, whether that be like a counselor or whatever, really negatively. Because I always kind of look back to that part of my life, and I really didn't enjoy it. And I think for me, it's been a real struggle to kind of overcome that trauma in brackets, to kind of use it now in a really positive way. Uh, and so for me, kind of, it took until only a few months ago, really, to kind of be brave enough to reach out and find somebody and actively pursue it myself. I've always had the encouragement from my family, and the support from them, but they would only kind of support me in kind of accessing it if I reached out for it myself. Um, and I remember the first conversation, and he was like, "What do you want out of this?" I was like, "I just don't want it to be terrible. And if I don't turn up again, you'll know it has been. But I have returned ever since on a monthly basis, and it's not been terrible." So I do think it is a really important kind of element of just a general person's health and well-being, I think, but even more so when you are highly strung, like most athletes probably are, and sometimes perhaps don't, you know, see everything perhaps, or they only see things one dimensionally, where there's perhaps a lot of other ways you can view something that can give you a lot kind of more like perspective on things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, firstly, it's great that you made it through to the first step recently. So congrats to that. It's definitely always difficult to do something when you've got a barrier in place, and yeah, it always takes courage to do something new for the first time as well. So that's really great. And I guess as well, you mentioned having a good support system around you, but it ultimately has to come from within. And I think that applies to sort of everything in terms of running. People know what you should or shouldn't do, but you always have to sort of go on that personal journey and find that place of being ready to do something yourself. And I suppose looking back maybe a little bit now, what would you say to yourself maybe perhaps 3 or 4 years ago that you wish you knew then? Or if you could go back in time, basically what I'm saying in a really, really, really bad way is if you could go back in time and tell yourself from about 4 years ago something, what would you want to tell yourself?
I think I probably want to tell myself to be a little bit braver when it comes to putting in place things that make my life a little bit easier, in terms of like mental health, and those sort of things. Like I think it's okay to want to reach out for that, and you don't have to frame it as reaching out for help. I think it's more kind of putting structure in place in your life that helps you maintain a more sustainable lifestyle. um I think there's so many negative connotations kind of associated with going to speak to a therapist, and um I think it is getting better and it is being reframed slightly differently, but I still think compared to many other kind of health and well-being things, it is still kind of considered a negative. So I'd probably go back and tell myself that it's absolutely fine to do that and it's probably for your best interests. And yeah, go ahead and you can do it, girl, because it's good for you. And it'll be okay and it'll help you. So yeah, I think if I was going to go back kind of 4 or 5 years, that's probably what I'd tell myself.
Yeah, no, that's really great to hear. And, maybe someone in a similar position can take some of that on board and maybe it'll tip them over into taking that first leap. And I suppose for you now, moving forwards, is there anything in particular that you might, I suppose, like consciously be looking to introduce or change in terms of your mindset with running?
This one's really hard because I'm always trying to take the pressure off myself a little bit. And every time I try, I always come back to the same kind of sticking point of I want to do more, I want to be better, I'm not good enough. Um, but I think I'm slowly kind of trying to rewire those thoughts to like, what have I done today? What was the purpose of today? Like, have I done enough for that? And kind of leave it there and park it and not think about it all day long. I think that's one of my biggest problems is that I'll revisit things all day until the next time I go out for a run. So I think, yeah, trying to leave Strava alone, trying not to, look at what I was doing 4 years ago to the day, all these sort of things that kind of help me kind of just to live in the moment a little bit more and then kind of move on. Trying to fill my basket with other things that aren't just running, which is, again, so much easier said than done. And I'm very dialed into what I want to achieve. But at the same time, as Dave reminds me, social recovery is just as important. So I try to include that in my life a little bit more these days too.
Yeah, definitely. I think, especially when you are a professional athlete and the amount of sort of time that's required, even in recovery as well as training, I guess it does become quite difficult to sort of maintain balance. And the running world, when you surround yourself with that and that's sort of what you're seeing, it's very easy to almost, I guess, get honed into that slightly distorted version of life. And yeah, I guess things can become, very overwhelming, very running focused, and that's really difficult for anyone to deal with. And it's not a natural kind of scenario that humanity were ever meant to deal with. That wasn't really what we were built to deal with.
No, absolutely. I think you're so right there. It's like I I think I am also I love the sport and I love following it. I like to know kind of results from things and what's going on and what people are doing. But it can become all kind of very absorbed in it. And at the end of the day, it is running at the end of the day, and that is all it is. And there's so many things going on in the world that are far more important. I could turn around to any of my school friends and tell them I'm going for a 2 hour run on the Sunday, and they wouldn't bat an eyelid. They really wouldn't care. They'd tell me what they did on Saturday night. So I think it is about putting things in perspective and yeah, reminding yourself that there are still bigger things going on in the world and in life, and it is only a small part of your life. Um, and if you go back to things like your health and your happiness are the most important things. I think that's always a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. And what motivates you then?
What motivates me?
Mm.
I think the fear of not achieving my potential probably motivates me.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what my potential is, but I want to be able to kind of look back whenever I finish competing competitively and think I did everything I possibly could to achieve the most that I could. And if I can do that, I think, yeah, I'll be really happy. So I think that kind of is what motivates me in the sport and kind of gets me out the door every day.
That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I can totally relate to that. I definitely would say more on the sort of maximizing side of things in life. It's you kind of when you do something, you want to at least make sure you've done the best you can. And yeah, I suppose the uncertainty of never really knowing what that full potential may or may not look like makes it quite hard to know. I suppose it's sort of a goal that's actually technically unachievable from a quantitative perspective. So it does mean it is, yeah, a chase, and it is difficult.
Definitely. It's like an ever moving goal as well, isn't it? I feel like it does stop you from ever kind of giving up as well, though, because you're like, well, was that my full potential, or can I do a little bit more? But I also think that would be the hardest thing when it comes to like not competing competitively as well, because you're like, is that the best I could do, or could I do a little bit more? Um, so I think yeah, it's finding the balance and kind of being satisfied with what you have done, and um, looking back and thinking like, oh, I have actually achieved a lot in the years I've run.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, personally, I never really thought much about competing beyond sort of like school or uni or whatever. And I raced Liverpool the other day, and it was my last race as an under 23. And actually finishing it, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I dropped out for the first time. It wasn't, a great race from that point of view, but I was so happy and relieved with that race because I was like, do you know what? It's done. I'm like,
Yeah.
there's nothing more to chase. I'm like, do you know what? It's finished. Like I can just chill and enjoy now. And I think
Yeah.
it kind of, yeah, highlights exactly what you're saying there, of it's sort of an ever-changing goal, and that there is that pressure to want to keep up with it. Have I done enough? And there is nothing that will ever come and tell you, yeah, you have, or yeah, you haven't.
No, absolutely. So I think it's yeah, I think it's being at peace with yourself and knowing like you're ready to step away and it's okay as well. And I think, I don't want that day to ever come because I think I'm going to struggle with it so much.
No, I think it's interesting though, because I think that I think everyone has a fear of the day it comes, but I think that day has come for me at Liverpool the other day. And on the other side of it, I can say that when it comes for a reason, because you're ready to like stop. And it doesn't actually feel bad because you're actually like, no, I actually am done. So I
Yeah.
feel like when like you will actually know, because there'll be a reason that you're ready to be done. And yeah, until that day comes, then you just keep blitzing it, really.
I'll come to you when I feel like that moment's come and I'll ask if our thoughts and feelings align.
Should I get a list at the ready? Tick, tick, tick. Scores above 8 indicate ready to
Yeah.
leave. Oh yeah. I guess that's the other thing with running as well. When you're doing something where you're listening to your body, and it's very much hard to ever really know, oh, have I done it right? Have I not done it right? There's no sort of right or wrong. But then the science and social media and advances in, I don't know, technology is always telling you, oh yeah, you should be doing this, changing your shoes this miles, doing these double thresholds. Are you someone who's quite like into the data and
I mean, like my training's very much directed by data, more so kind of lactate and heart rate rather than anything else. Um, but I also think for good reason, as I'm someone who tends to push themselves to the maximum. And if I'm not kind of finishing lying on the floor, I haven't, successfully completed the training session. Whereas I think, some of my best races over the last few years have come from actually kind of dialing into what tempo effort really is, not completely and utterly kind of bucketing myself twice a week. So I guess I use technology and science there as a way to kind of direct my training and to kind of, yeah, put the weeks together, I guess. And it also gives me another way to measure progress that's not directed on like pace. Uh, it's more kind of based on effort and kind of what that effort really looks like in the real world. With lactates don't lie, unfortunately. Um, so I have enjoyed using it as a training method. It, definitely, yeah, holds me accountable because I train a lot on my own as well. So I know I know if I run the first couple of reps too hard and I go and take a reading and it's way above where it's supposed to be, it's all on me and it's my fault and I should probably know better by this point.
No, I mean, I think that's a smart solution, really. You know in yourself that you're on the side of people who will push to the max. So do you know what? This is an opportunity to use data in an effective way to rein things back in. And yeah, I guess, there's pros and cons of taking a data-driven approach to training. and different people have different views, but it sounds like it is a really useful solution for yourself.
Absolutely. I think, um, yeah, like I said, I think it definitely has, touch wood, kept me like physically healthy. Like I don't pick up many niggles or injuries really. And I definitely think it's helped balance my training a little bit more. We're still working on finding where that balance really is and how kind of lifestyle outside of running affects kind of that training load. But yeah, I think it's been fundamental to kind of some of my 15-10, especially this year. All the training beforehand was all done on kind of lactate threshold and LT1, LT2, and all that jazz. And I think it had a really big impact on my ability to perform well over that 5K.
That's really interesting to hear. And would you say, like, I know you mentioned not necessarily knowing the sort of shape you're in, but was anyone aware based on the data that that time might be something you'd run on that time? Has there been like a good correlation between what the data's shown and what you've produced?
I think this is like a really interesting one because like obviously when you race, you don't, it's not who can run the fastest with the lowest lactate. It's like it's all the kind of elements above kind of, or the specific race elements that also kind of enable you to get the best out of you in a performance. But I think for me, like showing, like seeing a shift in like what my LT1 was and what my LT2 was gave me the confidence that um we were moving in the right direction. And it also was then reflected in the kind of the key sessions I did on the track as well, which we don't measure lactate for, but when your threshold moves and you're able to kind of then go to the track and perform like a really key 5K workout and it feels good, you hit the times, like you don't come off it absolutely battered. I think that then gives you the confidence to kind of go into the race being like, okay, we've ticked this box, and this box. I've now got the evidence that I can do this in training. If everything else comes together on race day, you should be able to do this. So I think, yeah, you kind of you piece all the bits of the puzzle together. But I think that data for me really gives me the confidence that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I guess it's that mind body connection again, and kind of the psychological side of almost having that belief, knowing, seeing, believing, and then ultimately executing as well. And yeah, I suppose like we're coming towards the end of our time now. So before we kind of close off with a few fun questions, in terms of sort of the female specific side of things, have you ever encountered any challenges that have maybe been brought about more from the fact that you're female?
Ooh. Like I've really struggled over the years with my cycle as a start. I spent a lot of time and money on kind of achieving a regular cycle, and I've seen a lot of specialists about it. But I think it's probably the most valuable thing I've ever done. And as inconvenient as a period is every month, I think it's a really good sign that you're healthy. So I guess that's probably the biggest struggle and challenge I've overcome as being a female, I guess.
Yeah. And what was sort of the process of going about that?
I think like first of all, like recognizing that there was an abnormal, like something a bit wrong going on, and kind of reaching out and seeking help for that. I mean, the process was years, like in terms of like actually achieving like a regular cycle. But I went to see a specialist in like 2018, and again in 2023. So it's, I think it's being persistent and kind of looking at multiple different reasons why something might be going on and kind of finding a cause and a way to kind of combat that as well. And it seems never ending at times, but also I think, yeah, probably the most important thing I've ever done and ever achieved. And yeah, I'm quite proud of myself for kind of getting to that as well and like recognizing that it was something I needed to do. Because I think sometimes people kind of do view it as like a perhaps a more like it's an inconvenient thing that perhaps you're running well, but I think if you want to like a long term like career in running and all the other things that come with being a female, like a family and things like that, it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And was that in relation to kind of running or overtraining, or was it kind of a separate situation in itself?
I think it came from a combination of being like severely underweight as a adult, and then having this autoimmune disease. Um, I just like my body never got to a stage where it was able to kind of go through that cycle every month. And yeah, I think now it's like completely normal. And I think that like, it's really important to show that there is like a positive outcome to it as well. Like, it is a bit, it is like a bit of a stressful thing going through trying to get to that result, and you might like be worried about it, but as well, like, now I'm confident that, every month I'm going to have a period, and every month I'm going to know if I've overtrained, if I'm not in a good spot, something else might be going on. That, hopefully one day we can have a family. So there's all the other things that kind of come with that as well. So yeah, I think I've always said to anyone who's asked me about it, like the best thing you can do is look, reach out for help and try and find a solution to whatever the problem might be as to why you're not having a regular cycle.
Definitely. I think it's great that you outlined that there because yeah, for so many reasons, so many things can happen to cycles. And yeah, especially when you're placing so many demands on your body as an athlete. And for any woman, whether you're placing demands or not, there's just so many important functions that happen. And yeah, in particular, like you say, being able to have a child, does require your hormones to be moving in the right cycle. And would you say that now, having resolved things there and having a regular cycle, that maybe you've noticed your performance is better, or have you kind of noticed any differences there?
Because I feel like I've had average performances this
Well,
year.
yeah, okay. Maybe
And like,
we'll rephrase to like in general. Do you feel more like healthy and stable?
yeah, definitely. And I think more that because I recognize the importance of having a period, I think it just, it gives me the confidence perhaps every month that I am stable. I'm on, like, I haven't perhaps overtrained, or perhaps if it is a little bit delayed, it gives me an indication that I have been really stressed or I have overtrained or something like that. So I think it just helps create a little bit more balance in terms of training. Um, and also like just helps, I think just helps you remain healthy as an individual. Like hopefully like it maintains better bone health, like all the other things that kind of come with having a regular cycle as well, which I think are so much more important than whatever kind of athletic performance you have.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And I guess it is, yeah, one of those ways that you can see physically a sign of your health. And what you say about stress, actually, I know personally I've lost a lot of periods that magically appear the day of my last exam, like quite literally, the evening of a last exam, suddenly the late period just appears and it's like, wow, okay, like clearly it's
The
happened
body
enough
knows.
times. Yeah, it knows like stress does have a real impact. And yeah, so I guess we're at the end of our time now and stuff. So a few questions to close off with. Firstly, what is the most recent meme or reel that has resonated with you?
I saw a reel, I think, on Instagram today, and I think it was sports shoes, and it was, I want to say, George Wheeler falling flat face first in the mud at Liverpool yesterday. And kind of just sums up life sometimes, doesn't it? Like that kind of like falling in the mud face first and then like getting up, and like kudos to him for like completing the race, to be fair. It looked absolutely horrendous, but I think yeah, that did give me a giggle, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's just like, yeah, life is messy. That is for
Yeah.
sure. And country you want to visit next?
Ooh. I love Amsterdam, and I send Dave probably one of those, send it to your first person that comes up on Instagram, you want a trip to Amsterdam or whatever, pretty much every day. So I'm just gonna go with Amsterdam.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely a nice place by the sounds of it. A lot of people seem to enjoy themselves there. And if we were going to be invaded by aliens and you you know, they were coming in, you got 24 hours notice, they're polite aliens. What's the first thing you
Yeah.
do?
Ooh, I'd probably go and see all my family as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Wave them all goodbye and say the aliens are taking us.
No, good. Yep. Get in there nice and quick. And what is, or do you have any pre-race rituals?
Hmm. I think I used to have a lot more than I do now. I don't like one of my old ones was I had to like put my legs up like, on a wall and like hang them in the sky before the night before a race. But I've stopped doing that for many years and I've had good performances, so I don't think it's necessary any longer. I think I'm I think I'm a bit different to most people. I like to run twice a day, the day before a race.
That is
Uh,
new.
but it's a little bit rogue, isn't it? But I'll do like 2 20-minute runs the day before a race.
Fair
Um,
enough. Fair enough.
but from that, I feel like I've learned from traveling a lot for race that if you have anything too specific and it ain't it ain't there, you're screwed. So yeah, I try to keep it as low key as I can.
Yeah, no, that's nice. Yeah, if you can remove the number of things that need to happen, it definitely does make life a lot easier. And finally, if you had to describe yourself as a chocolate bar, what chocolate bar would you be and why?
Hmm. That's such a good question. I reckon I don't know.
You can have
Mm.
a fruit if you want, or an animal. Those are the
Oh
iterations.
no, I'll go for chocolate.
Okay.
I'd probably go for like a Tony's chocolate bar. Do you know? Because like they're all like all the pieces are like very broken up into like very random bits. And I think I'm a bit of a random scatty sort of person. So I think that probably reflects me quite well. And I do like the chocolate as well, to be fair. So it's a win-win.
I love that. I've never had one myself, but yeah, yeah, like I like that analogy, and yeah, maybe I have to try one out.
Yeah, I'd recommend.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's been great chatting to you. And yeah, you're clearly someone who's overcome a lot of things and has such a great approach to life, which is always lovely to hear. So
Oh,
yeah,
thank you very
thank
much. Thank
you.
you for having me.
No, it's been great talking with you. So that's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, be sure to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This really helps to get the content out there. And I want to make this podcast the best possible for you. So go follow Fitter, Faster, Happier on Instagram. That's Fitter, Faster, Happier to leave your questions, comments, and feedback, and for updates and guest requests. All the best for the week ahead, guys. Run happy, live happy, be happy.